Hello and welcome back. Today's guest is Eva Sutherland, and she's a very good friend of mine who has built herself up effectively from nothing into a successful entrepreneur in an area which many people might consider a waste of time. Today, we're going to talk about how video games can teach us life lessons, whether video games are unhealthy, and most importantly, how to build a successful career out of your passion. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the episode. So you are someone that I've got to know since I got to KL, and I find you quite inspirational because you've taken something that loads of people have as a hobby and tends to be more of a distraction than something that adds value to their life, and you've made a successful business out of it and a career out of it. So I guess a good place to start is, would you mind telling us a little bit about your background, where you came from and where you are now?
So I'm from Malaysia, born and bred, but I've lived overseas here and there for a couple of years. Now I'm back in KL again, and I work in video games, which, like you said, is I think there's a stigma that's tied to video games, which I'm hoping it's gotten better now. I think people often view video games as like the traditional view is a waste of time, and it's not a healthy hobby. People will say, oh, you don't go to the sun. There's that, the meme, oh, you need to go touch some grass. Yeah, exactly that. However, I do think there are so many benefits to video games, and I myself have always loved video games. So what we do at our company is that we produce concept art and concept design for video games. And yeah, it's a great job. I wouldn't pick anything else, I think.
Why do you think that video games have this stigma attached to them?
Well, I think, don't get me wrong, it's not perfect, but what is perfect in this world, right? So I think if you look at cases of when, say, someone gets addicted to video games, right? And then they just sit inside all day and don't do anything, or what seems like they're not doing anything. And of course, the genre of video games and the media and the theme of it, the theming, like a lot of it is like shooting. So that's not great. But I think that, let's say we compare what was before video games would be television, right? And that was, back then, that was a thing that rotted your brain, right?
Yeah.
And let's just take those two, because those two are the main things that are the so-called easiest access for people to, when they have nothing left, what do they have aside from books, of course, which is what people tend to encourage. If you look at just sitting and watching a piece of media, if it's useful media, say like this podcast, and you're sitting and watching or listening to it, that's great. But if you're just watching a show that doesn't, it's for pure enjoyment, I find that if we're comparing enjoyment to enjoyment, I think games, biased of me to say, but I think games win in the sense that you're still actively doing something rather than just sitting there. If you're watching a cartoon, that's just a silly cartoon. Whereas if you're playing a game with silly cartoons, you still have to actively use your brain to, play the game. It's a medium where it's very, very hands-on. It's very, I don't know what the word is, tactile. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to actively participate, or the game doesn't move. You watch a movie, the movie moves regardless if you're paying attention or not. The plot's going to move forward. If you don't move forward in the plot doesn't move forward. So I feel like there's still that sense of active, role-playing games are very popular, but you do have to role-play in a sense, right, to actively partake in it. And I think that is something that people kind of push aside when they think about video games. They forget about that aspect. Or I think a lot of it is also, many people haven't played games. I think coming into the current generation, more people have touched games. It is something that is not maybe as accessible as television. That's the thing. Well, now it's YouTube, isn't it? Or TikTok and social media. Everyone's got a phone and it's easy to do that. But you have games on phones as well. So it's a matter of, do you want to doom scroll or do you want to play a puzzle game? At least the puzzle game's going to stimulate your brain a little bit rather than just doom scrolling.
100%.
Yeah.
I find personally the problem that I have with video games is that it stimulates the brain too much, and that they're so perfectly programmed to give you the perfect release of dopamine and the perfectly accessible challenge with the perfect reward at the end, that it then can make the rest of life seem a little bit boring in comparison. And I know as a teenager, I wasted days and days of my life playing games, and they were always great fun to be playing. But then afterwards, if I had to go, take a walk outside or touch grass, as the meme says, like, this is boring. You just kind of wanted to go back to that. But I think as a healthy balance in a lifestyle, it is better than the alternative, or some alternatives that are out there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it is important, especially let's say if you're a parent. So I myself am a parent. If you want to expose your children to games, because either they will be exposed either way from their friends outside of your control, so to speak, because games are kind of everywhere now. It's way more popular than it's ever been. So I would say there are healthy approaches to having your child play games and partake in games. For example, there's a game that's very, very popular. It got very popular over COVID. I don't know if you know, it's called Animal Crossing.
I've heard of it,
You've
yeah.
heard of it. Yeah. It's a very mild game. It's essentially paying off your debt for a house loan. So
Right.
you arrive on an island and a raccoon tells you, "Hey, I'll give you this house and you can have it up front, but you have to pay me back over time," right? No interest, which is great. And the game actually runs in real time. So, for example, there are other games where you have a farm, but the 24 hours in that game, or a single day in that game, maybe takes 10 minutes in real life. Whereas Animal Crossing actually runs in real time. So whatever time of day it is for you, it's going to be that time in the game. So if it's nighttime, it'll be nighttime there, and different things will happen in the game based on that. So when I got my kid to play this game, he was very, that dopamine hit that you mentioned, which a lot of that, I think that's what we suffer from. And games are not the only thing that's guilty of this,
Oh,
right?
100%.
Social media,
Mm.
the doom scrolling is the dopamine hit right there. So if you're gonna get your dopamine somewhere, right, and working out, all sorts of other things. So my kid was kind of having trouble with, say, exercising patience. And in this game, because it's real time, yes, you can cheat your way around it, but if you don't cheat, you have to wait. You have to wait till the next day. The shop's going to close at 8 p.m. If you want to sell the items to make the money to pay off your house, you have to wait till the next morning. And that is what the director of the game and the creator of this game intended. It's not a game that you rush because, a lot of people tend to rush games. Oh, I want to get to the highest level. I want to get to the last boss. I want to get the best loot or whatever it is. But this game really takes it easy and pulls you back a little bit and go, hey, you're on this great island. Yes, it is kind of putting you in this world where everything seems kind of more than ideal and more than perfect, but it's also putting these kind of real life tools that you can use. So when I let my kid play this game, he was able to exercise, oh, okay, I do have to wait. But I think we don't exercise that muscle enough anymore. The waiting for that gratification is far and few these days. Everything's instant. Everything's like, oh, I want food, get it delivered. It's right downstairs. I need a hit or I need something. It's so accessible these days. So when you look at a game like that, and there are many other examples as well, puzzle solving games, for example, definitely make you think outside of the box, which encourages you to be a little bit more creative with problem solving. So I think if you were a parent and you're, realizing your kid is going to be exposed to games inevitably, it would be helpful to steer them towards this if that's your concern. However, I think that there are so many things that I've gained from video games. I mean, of course, my job and everything that I do on a day to day, but I've also met so many people who are some of the best people I've ever met in my life because of video games and the community that it fosters. There's a lot of bonding that can happen. And I think with social anxiety, it's also very helpful because you can kind of start getting used to speaking to people. Of course, everything has a good and bad side, but we'll focus on the good side first. And I think even my son has met his best friend who I've, spoken to and had calls with, and he's a really, really lovely kid. And he wouldn't have met him if not for video games, right? Because they met on the game. So
100%. The social aspect. And something else you touched on was using games to educate and to help your kid learn.
yeah,
And one of my best friends here, his whole business is built around gamification of learning to teach people sales. And even as adults, if the content within it is designed to be educational, especially in today's day and age where everyone has got attention issues,
Yeah.
gamification is one of the best ways to do it, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's like you said, these things are designed to give you that kind of, oh, I like that, I'm going to do that again, right? So there are many things, like you said, gamification is a big thing for learning. So it's a very productive use of how video games are made to work. There are also other kind of fronts that gaming has contributed to. For example, I think on the medical front, I admit that I'm not completely up to speed on it, but at one point they were using VR and AR to help on the medical fronts, and for example, to help patients envision what it's like when they're walking if they're in rehab to try to learn how to walk again. So if they put on a VR, because the brain is a powerful thing. And have you seen the mirror experiment with the
hand?
the phantom limb syndrome, which is a very unfortunate thing because people who have unfortunately lost their limbs, they go through a lot of pain and suffering, but just a simple mirror will do the trick. So there have been, how do you say, fronts pushed where patients will put on a VR headset and they'll be able to simulate what it's like to walk, and it actually has helped them to learn to walk again, or at least minimize the amount of work required to get back there. So in that sense, you can see there's so many good things about gaming that is to be had, right? The potential is there, and it's just I could go on and on about how awesome video games and gaming is, and I think just with anything else, it's about focusing on it in the right way, in a healthy way. Because even if we look at, say, exercise, right, you can get too obsessed with exercise and diet and nutrition to a point where it becomes unhealthy, right? Me myself, I actually, when I was much fitter than I am now. So and I got to the point where I was, I think, 18% body fat, which is the optimum. But that came with an eating disorder because I was like, no, I can't go past that threshold. And I was at the gym 6 days a week, sometimes 7, like every day of that week. I was at the time I was playing ice hockey, so I was on the ice 3 times a week, and it became this sort of, yeah, it just became an obsession in not a great way. So I've kind of thankfully let that go. And again, just food, right? Food is a thing that you can also go overboard with. So I think everything again is about in moderation, not just in the amount, but kind of in the way you focus it.
100%. I
Yeah.
think you hit the nail on the head there with it's the amount of time that you're spending towards it. Because if you were to spend 8 hours a day in the gym, then everyone would be like, that is very unhealthy.
Yeah.
And watch that. And that's where the stigma comes from with video games, right? It's not someone playing it for an hour or 2 a night. It's the problem with the addiction and having your dopamine system hijacked and then spending the whole day in front of it, right?
Yeah.
So it's everything in moderation. So how, when you have made it pretty much your whole life, you enjoy playing it in your spare time and your whole business is built around video games, how have you managed to keep balance?
Well, being a parent helps because you can't just, you know that you can't let your kid play games all day, which is strange because this is the industry I work in. And, that being said, I don't, there's a game, immensely popular, World of Warcraft. I'm sure, I don't know who has heard of it, but it's one of the biggest, MMORPGs, which is massive multiplayer online role-playing game, right? And it's got, at the peak would be millions of people playing it, and it's all social, it's all everyone interacting with each other. And even when you transition from one, say, area to another, there'll be a loading screen, and even in that loading screen it'll say, hey, don't forget to take breaks, because we are aware that yes, these things are designed to be addictive, but you shouldn't be sitting and not getting up and stretching. I think with hand in hand in a sense with how health has become such a focus now as well, way more than back in the day when if you had a cough and the doctor would say, hey, just go smoke some cigarettes and that will fix your cough. I think because everyone's also a little bit more health minded, then that helps as well. I think culturally it's going to work together really, really nicely and harmonize because, I think we're all health conscious enough to go. We all have that nagging thought when we sat down too long. Oh, I mean, apart from your joint starting, well, maybe that's just me being old, but apart from your body telling you, hey, you've sat for 6 hours, you know, um, I think we're all a little bit more health conscious now. Even my kid, and they're like a teenager, and he's like, I think I should, make sure I eat my veg and make sure I go for my walks, which is great. I'm like, it's good when they say it themselves, right? Rather than you telling them. And I think they're more inclined to do it if they want to do it themselves. So I think that will come into play as well. And I think that's going to kind of move forward together really nicely. And yeah, again, everything in moderation. You can do, you say, oh, don't play games, but I'm allowed to watch Netflix or just, sit and scroll on YouTube and stuff. And it's gonna be the same thing anyway. So
Yeah.
yeah,
It's just dopamine hijack in a different form.
exactly. Yeah. So it's where you're going to get it. Yeah.
Mm. So how did you end up making a career out of it?
Um. Well, I didn't actually want to do art in a sense. So when I was younger, I wanted to do music, but like wanted to be a music producer. So I wanted to compose. Obviously not as legendary. Maybe I would have been, I don't know. We don't know the potential, but like say compose soundtracks for games and for films, and or produce, soundtracks and music for games and film, because that's a whole other department and a whole industry there to be had. So I think when I was 3, I asked my parents, could I have a piano for my birthday next year when I was 4? And they thought, oh, she's a 3-year-old. What does she know? And then my 4th birthday came by and there was no piano. And they figured I'd forget because it would have been a year that has passed. And I said, oh, could we not have gotten the piano? Was it too expensive or something? And they were like, oh, she remembered. So they did end up, lucky me, they rented a piano that could be had at home. And I got lessons. And then I fell in love with music and wanted to pursue music. And my father said, no, you can't do music. You should pursue those, because I doodle in my spare time, like little cartoon things. And he was like, oh, you should just do that instead. That's way better, because I think he thought when I said do music was go play gigs and in open mics and stuff, which there's nothing wrong with that. But I think he didn't want me to go down that road, because that, like video games, has also has its associations, like, oh, there'll be things involved with that kind of lifestyle. And so he kind of steered me towards this side, and then I ended up going to college for it, because it's like, oh, hey, you're not allowed to do that, you can do that. I'm very lucky, all things considered, because the typical traditional 3 is, lawyer, engineer, doctor. So I didn't have to be limited to those 3. I could at least do something that was a little bit more on the artsy side still, even if it wasn't music. And that was the goal, to become a concept artist. And basically, I was in Canada for school for it. I got into the bachelor's degree that I needed to, which was technical illustration, from a relatively well-known school in the industry, where you could, coming out from that school with that degree, you'd most likely get a job. And the college slash university, I don't know what it is now. I think they tried to change their status over the last couple of years. They changed the program whilst we were in it, and said, oh, we're no longer offering technical illustration courses. And I said, well, we're just in first year and you're taking it away, and we have 3 years left. And they were also they were kind of firing people. So I went to class one day, and I asked the lecturer, like, hey, how do you do this? And he said, oh, just Google it, because I think they were in the process of being let go. So I said, well, this is sodded, right?
Why am I paying so many thousand a year to
Yeah,
be
I mean,
told
my
to Google it?
parents, bless their hearts, they did pay for school, and I'm very lucky in that sense. But I still felt it in the sense like I don't want my parents to be working, you know, working their nuts off to just be having a guy saying Google it. Funny enough, I Googled it and found a school in Singapore, which is where I ended up having to write to my parents to tell them I'm dropping out of college was one of the scariest things ever at the time, to forsake a degree for a diploma, which is like, oh my days, what's happening? But thankfully, they had faith in me, and I think if not for that, I would not be where I am today. So it's an interesting. I'm tangenting, but it's an interesting scenario because at the time it seemed like everything was falling apart. But if that had not happened, I would not be here right now, essentially, right? It's one of those weird things where everything kind of happens for a reason. But I went to school in Singapore. That's where I met my partner, and we did the same course together, which was concept art. And then after that, which I got a job in a company, and I met my now friend and ex-boss, and he basically kind of showed me the ropes in a sense, and he's wonderful, amazing. If anyone's inspirational, he is really. So, but yeah, and then that's kind of how we got to where we are. In Because I did leave that company because I had to help my parents with their business, and I suppose that kind of comes into play as well because my father is a businessman, and I think ever since as far back as I could remember, he's always going, you should always do your own business. You should always work for yourself, right? If you're your own boss, you don't work for anyone, you work for yourself, which I don't think is true. I feel like that's a very, pardon the phrase, boomer mindset. I feel like if you have a company, you work for the company. And that means you work for and with your team and your people, right? Because for me, every day I wake up and I go, can I make sure everyone's getting paid this month, right? And it's not through a sense of obligation. Of course, I want to make sure everyone's fairly paid, but it's I think everyone deserves to be happy at work. I think that's one of the biggest blessings anyone could find is if they find something that they enjoy doing and that they love doing and they can pay the bills with it. I know some people disagree. Some people say, "Oh, don't do what you love for a job because then you'll start to hate it," and stuff like that, right?
Have you
So,
found that to be the case?
no, I don't think so. Sorry, I'm just gonna have a sip here. I don't think I've I don't think I've ever kind of dreaded going to work, ever since I got into this. So I don't know what would have happened if my father had let me do music, but I can say that I'm very, very happy and grateful to be where I am now. So thanks, Dad, I guess, for pushing me to do this. Wouldn't have met my partner, wouldn't have met all the friends that I have now,
Mm. There's
if
that
not for that.
stereotype of the strict Asian parents forcing their children to be a doctor or good at maths, right? And then your dad pushed you into doing artwork, and look at you now.
Yeah. I think my father's he's a very creative man, like truly. And I think when you say the word creative, people tend to associate it with drawing or music or writing. But creativity can come in so many shapes and forms. There are even, because now I'm mostly on the business side rather than the production side of things. And even in, say, deal making and negotiations, there is creativity in that too, right? And I think people think, oh, suits and business people are all stiffs. But if you think about how creative some deals are in, oh, the give and take between the two parties or three parties, right? And I think there's a lot of thought that goes into that. That is creativity. But yes, my father being that stereotype of, even if it wasn't a doctor, lawyer, engineer, even in that the art side of it, he wanted to say, "No, you can't do that. You must do this." So
This worked
that's
out well.
that's funny that you pointed that out. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's true.
So you went through a period where you dropped out of university when your parents had paid for you to go to it overseas
Yeah.
because you wanted to try something else, and you said at the time felt like the world was kind of falling apart.
Mm.
And obviously you couldn't have seen where you'd end up now.
Yeah, no.
What would you have told yourself at that time if you could?
At that time, I, I think it's something that I tell myself now anyway. So I tell myself this, which is everything will be okay. I think, and as things people say, oh, it's so cheesy when you say that. But things are cheesy or corny for a reason because it's kind of true. They're partially true. And it's like things really do happen for a reason. I think for me, talking about negotiations. So when I actually wrote an email to my parents because I was too chicken to call them. So I wrote an email to them saying, here are the pros if you let me drop out and go to this school in Singapore. 1, I'll be closer to home. 2, you actually spend less money because you're going to spend instead of 3 years, it's 1 year.
It's the art of negotiation you were telling me about. The creativity and deal making.
I suppose, yeah. Because I was like, oh, there's so many more benefits than me staying here. But truly, it was big. The main thing was that imagine if you go to, I don't know, because it's hard, I'm trying to find a field to compare it to. Say it's medicine and you wanted to study to be a neurosurgeon. So you go get accepted into neurosurgery and you're going to do the whole thing. And in the first or second year, they tell you, oh, we don't offer neurosurgery anymore. You're going to do, cardiovascular now, and then you're like, no, but I came here to do neuro. And they go, no, it's cardio now. So what would you do in that situation, right? You'd probably go, I'm going to find somewhere else to do neuro. So that was essentially my situation. So I told them, like, look, the school that's in Singapore is, the guy knows what he's doing, the guy who owns and runs the school. It's a very small class. So it's only 30 people in a batch, and it's only 90 students at any given time in the school. So no more than 100 people. So it's very focused, which I feel is always going to be better because you get more time and I think we made so many connections and again friends from that school as well. But yeah, if I could tell myself something, then I'd say, don't worry, everything's gonna be okay. And I I think one of the things that I do now in almost any situation when I come to a point of either decision making or fork in the road is there's a term for this, and someone I was chatting with recently told me what the name for this concept is, and it's gone out my head. But it's played a game that I call what's the worst that could happen. And in every situation now where I go, oh no, I need to make a decision. So in scenario A and B, I'll go, what's the worst that could happen here, and what's the worst that could happen here. So, and in that game, you basically follow that cookie trail of like, okay, if I do this, this will happen, and this is the result. And if I do the other option, this, and that's the result. And I think it's a matter of which result can you accept and that's like a negative road, by the way, like a negative trail. Oh, if I do this, I'll lose all my money, go bankrupt, and then I'll be homeless. Or if I do that, I'll, burn all my socks in my drawer, like something, And it's like, okay, so which one can I accept if it does happen? We're not obviously hoping for the worst case scenario.
You plan for the worst and hope for the best.
In a sense, yeah. And because if you plan for the worst and you can completely accept it, is it really the worst at the end of the day? You know what I mean? It's like, oh yes, I can accept that I will not have socks for a year. Yeah, fine. That, you know what I mean? And if you've already accepted that situation and put yourself in it, I think some people might think it's a pessimistic point of view, but I don't think so. I think it's just being prepared, really. But yeah, I would probably tell myself that at that point in time. That was a big turning point in my life, to be fair. I think that was when I really started to learn how to love myself, which is one of the hardest things to learn, I think, at least to me in life. I'm not very old, but I'm not very young either. But in this whole kind of experience, that's been the most difficult thing, I think. But once that happened, everything kind of switched, everything changed. So I think that point was, so when you ask that question, it's an interesting one because I go back to the memory of that and I go, would I tell myself anything? Yeah, I would say everything's going to be okay, just to kind of reassure and comfort myself, that weird future self going back and meeting yourself kind of thing. But I think that obviously hindsight 2020, now looking back, it was okay. Yeah.
I think there's a beautiful message in there, and that's that you don't need guidance, you need positivity and perseverance, and you'll get where you're supposed to be.
I think perseverance is a big thing. There was a TED Talk. I'm sorry, I can't give you the names, but I will send you the information if you're interested still. It's worth watching, I think, for everyone. And it was a talk about grit. And grit is something you can't really teach. You know what I mean? Like, or perseverance, really. How do you teach perseverance in someone? You can encourage, you can, it's the leading the horse to water situation, right? You can cheer them on, say, hey, you've got 10 meters left and the finish line's right there, keep going. And they might keep going, they'll hit the finish line. But, it begs the question, have they really, have they been taught that? If you don't cheer them on, are they going to actually hit that finish line?
Maybe there's a way to gamify teaching people perseverance.
I think there is, yeah. And one of my favorite developers actually kind of does that. He makes these really incredibly challenging games. But in the game itself, basically you're a character, you can start off with very, very like just a sword or a dagger, and you have to go fight all these bosses. And they're incredibly difficult, right? Like I've actually not touched the games when they first came out because of the reputation they had for being difficult. But in reality, they are challenging, but they're not impossible. And it seems impossible. Like the recent one that came out, I sat there for 12 hours. This is terrible, but I really actually sat there for 12 hours trying to beat the final boss of this game. And I feel like, I know it's terrible that I sat there for 12 hours, but it's like in my mind, it's like, no, I can do this. I'm going to beat this boss. And to be fair, I think across the board everyone who has played the game has that shared experience. But this game is, and he's been in interviews where they asked him, hey, why do you make your game so punishing? Why are you trying to punish the players? Because these games are notorious for you dying 100 times to even finish it. You die at least 100 on your first playthrough, right? And he's like, it's not my goal to punish the players or to give them a bad time. It's about, teaching them to persevere and push through, and they will be rewarded at the end. Because with everything that he's designed with the fights, basically, there's nothing that is unfair, in a sense that you can dodge away from a hit. You can find a new weapon to use. He's given you all the tools that you need in the game to find and explore and discover to go beat that boss.
You just need the grit.
You just need that grit. So, and there's nothing wrong with going, hey, I can't do this game. It's not for me. That's fine, because it isn't for everyone. Sometimes you just want to pay off your house to a raccoon, on an island. And that's perfectly fine. And I think that's, again, coming back to the beauty of games. There's always a game for everyone. But with these games, yeah, to gamify grit, I guess I would immediately think of, because I'm also obsessed with these games. So I played these games for the first time and going, oh my days, like these, yeah, it's really challenging, as I, heard they were, but it's not impossible. I can do this. Because there'll be points where, the typical, oh, it's a health bar and I have to, beat that boss's health. And you'll get to a sliver of health and then you'll die. And you'll be like, oh man, that feeling, so close. And I think it's a dopamine hit, but at the same time, you do learn a lot about yourself to go, will you do it again? And do you have the patience? There have been many smash screens over this game. Many people have thrown their controllers and stuff. And I'm a very hot-tempered person, so by default, it's something that I had to kind of stamp out of myself to kind of, okay, calm down. So I was concerned about that as well, playing these games. But by doing that, I've learned a lot of patience and go, that sucks, but it's okay, we go again. Right? It's okay, we go again. And when we go again, we get rewarded for it. So I've gotten to the point where I can now do the games without getting hit a single time by anything. So I'll play the game from start to finish without taking a single hit. Like I'll hit credits without getting in, hit by a boss, which is, again, something that you have to keep
Mm.
You go on that hamster wheel and you keep practicing and doing it. But like with any craft, you practice and you get better at it.
It's again some takeaways to real life, and that every time you fail, you don't start from square one again. You start from a point of experience and education, so that whenever you're tackling the next thing, you are more of a person, right? So just doing the thing is better than doing nothing at all.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. You've encapsulated that perfectly. So thank you. Yes. The newest game that this developer has put out is one of their best-selling titles, and it's even more, I wouldn't say that I use the word forgiving, but it encourages you to try even more. It's even more encouraging, in fact, because it's now given you the option, instead of a linear kind of journey, which the previous games kind of were, you had branching paths, but ultimately you end up in a closed loop, a semi-closed loop. This game, the newest one, is open world. So if, let's say, you face a boss and you can't beat it, you're actually now allowed to go out, get a bit more, fight a couple
Go
normal.
take a chill pill, yeah.
Yeah, go take a chill ride. You get a horse now as well, so you can ride your horse, run around the very beautiful world, get some experience points, level up, and then go try the boss again. So, and I think that, yeah, like you said, there is a lesson to be had. And I think that is the director's idea. It's like, hey, you learn, if the boss raises his right hand, you want to dodge that way, right? And like you said, even if you die, you're not starting from point zero, from the ground up again. You've already have a foundation, and you're coming in with the knowledge. And I think with art and concept art, it's actually a similar thing, and I'm sure with a lot of other endeavors as well. Say you're working on a document. I think this is applicable to anyone. You're working on a spreadsheet or a document, an assignment, whatever it might be. You've written an essay, you've burnt the midnight oil, and you stayed up all night. You forgot to hit save, and you close the document, you lose, I don't know, 5 hours worth of work, and the pain that comes with it. You're like, oh, but you know what? The second time you do it, it's going to be 2 hours. It won't take you 5 hours anymore. You'll probably do it in half the time. And you might probably do it better because you're doing it a second time and you've already known what to do. And whilst you're redoing, you feel, oh, actually, now I realize this doesn't sound right. I'll rephrase it. So I think that part of that's the grit and the perseverance, I suppose, that is important for not just people to have, but I think it's important to teach our kids to do it as well.
To fall forward.
To fall forward, yes, that's a lovely way to say it. Are we allowed to swear on this?
Yeah, mild.
Is the F word allowed? Okay, well, I'll say this. I'll not use the actual word, but I'll use the letter F. But there's a phrase that I've been using recently that there's a reason why they call it an F up and not an F down.
I like it.
Right? If you're going to mess up or fall forward, as you very eloquently put it, you fall hard so that you know how not to fall again.
Fuck upward, not down.
Yes, there you go. Yes, there's a reason. Well, now you've opened the can of worms, but Pandora's box, I'll just only say it once. But yeah, there's a reason why it's called a fuck up and not a fuck down. Because if you're gonna fail, at least fail spectacularly. And then you get back up and then you don't fail again because you'll know the worst way to fail. And you just go, yeah, that's how you don't fall off the horse. It's okay, I'll get back up and then I'll do it again.
I love that. So one thing I want to sort of wrap up with is where you started from being dropping out of a university that you felt had let you down to where you are now running a concept art business with 20 members of staff under you. Other people are going to be in that same sort of position where they're going to have hobbies which the rest of the world might deem unhealthy or not a serious career. And what would you say to them?
I'd say, I think that you should, okay, this is a lot of parts coming into play. There's like a mom brain in the back there going, don't say that. So because my hobby has become my job, I've had to pick up a new hobby in a sense. So I picked up content creation in a way. So I started, I don't do it anymore. Now I'm shifted over, but I used to stream on Twitch. And that became my hobby. It actually was it was that kind of thing that happened in COVID where everyone started streaming, because everyone was stuck at home. I didn't do it during that boom. I actually came in after that boom, but it was because I was stuck at home the whole time. And for me, speaking is very, very important. And I was starting to feel like, you know, I don't know if I can have a good conversation anymore. So what better way than to be on a live platform where you can't edit, you can't filter, and you just speak with people. And that's what's a way to get good at something, you just keep doing it, right? Obviously do it in the right way, but still you have to keep exercising that muscle. And so that became my hobby. But if there's something that you enjoy, I would say do it. I wouldn't say, so the mom brain's kicking in and I wouldn't say like, oh yeah, just quit your job and go do YouTube full time or go stream full time. I wouldn't encourage anyone to do that, to be fair. Unless you're in a position to do it, then maybe. And I know it's hard because trust me, I know it's hard. Like, I'm trying to find a time to do so many side projects that I want to do. And I know it's difficult to be working full time and then doing something on the side. You start to lose sleep. You have to sacrifice, sleep or social or something, right? Or health. And that starts to deteriorate. So I know it's not easy, but I would say if you enjoy doing something, do it. Like, because, and as long as all your affairs are taken care of, do what you love. I think there are fewer joys. Is that the right way to say it? There are fewer joys in this world than doing what you love. What's the way you phrase
I
it?
don't know, but that works.
There are not many things that are better than doing what you love or pursuing what you love. I mean, just yesterday I was watching this interview with the guy who makes microscopic sculptures. Have you seen that?
I haven't.
He makes sculptures literally like a replica of, you would be familiar with the Queen's carriage when she has an event, and it can fit in the hole of a needle, and it's a full-on sculpture. And a woman playing a violin, and how does he make the violin strings? He'll hit his shirt and a bit of fluff comes out, and he uses that fluff to be the violin string, and he'll sit there for 16 hours a day just doing this. He's got, I think, the Guinness World Record for the smallest sculptures, and he does this what he loves. The video game director that I mentioned, I think he pursued what he loved, and he's basically achieved a career that is unprecedented in history, especially because they're from Japan, and I believe pursued what he loved. And for him as well, the project that he picked up from within the company was, deemed as a project that wasn't going to be a success by the company. At the time, he was not in the position where he is today. And he said, hey, can I have that project? Can I work on it? And then it started that kind of chain reaction of becoming one of the most successful, developers in the industry today. And I think, I don't know him personally. I would love to meet him just to say, hey, I love your stuff. And that's about it, really. But, or work together, that would be the dream. But I think his games are so successful because he puts what he loves into it. I think a lot of people will say, for example, the microscopic sculpture guy. You might have a hobby or something that you love that's kind of like that. I like making sculptures out of hair. I don't know. And you might say, no one's going to want that, right? No one's going to like that. But I think that there's something interesting about, well, in the human experience as a society. I don't think you're ever going to be, I don't want to sound too grim, but you're never going to be the only person on the planet who either likes or dislikes something. There's going to be at least one person out there who totally gets what you do, right? And who will enjoy what you do. But I think the most important thing is you enjoy it and find the thing that, that flow state that you can get into. So if you love, I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example that's not what I do. If you love cooking, cook, right?
I can think of a couple of examples. Just because in today's day and age with social media, whenever you put so much time into one thing and become so good at it, no matter how obscure that might be, if you then put it out there, even people who aren't particularly interested will look at it and think, that is impressive, right? And my ex during COVID went viral for hula hooping because, just putting one of those bands around her waist and spinning it around. And I saw a guy the other day upload something skipping and has 5 million followers or something just from skipping with a rope. So these things that you might think are trivial,
Yeah.
if you love something and you just keep doing it and you become so good at it that even people who don't take part in it as a hobby will look at it and think that's impressive,
Yeah.
then you're going to be able to make a career out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Basically that. Yes. It's, I think that anyone and everyone, the one thing, regardless of what it is that you enjoy or whatever your thing is, if you are genuinely enjoying it, I think that joy that you get from it is absolutely infectious. I think regardless like, people don't like video games or hula hooping, but if you enjoy doing it, I'm gonna watch that video and go, wow, this person's first of all bloody good at it, but second of all, they really like what they're doing, right? And I think it's why those it's reality TV, it's also designed to kind of hook you in, but when you do watch, forget the editing, forget everything aside, but the contestants that do go on, they go on because they love what they do, right? The talent shows, they go on because they love to sing, they love to do acrobatics, they love to tell jokes, they love to do impressions, whatever it is. I think the ones that usually come up on the top, I'm not going to put skill or how good or bad they are. Even the ones that don't win, they do it and they get on TV in front of millions of people because they love what they do. They love what they do. And as it's kind of a shame because I know a lot of people who are very good at what they do, but they don't like being on social media. But there are other avenues, like other ways to kind of push and explore that if it's something that you want to turn into a career. So if you're not, say, particularly keen on being on social media, there are other ways to have your stuff put out there, right?
Yeah. One thing I've learned over the last 6 months is, or still definitely a work in progress, is the ability to put yourself out there. And if you do have one of these weird and wonderful talents where you've invested hundreds of hours and you're amazing at it, just put it up. What's the worst that could happen, as you say?
Yes, yeah. What have you got to lose, right? Because doesn't get views, you never had the views anyway, right?
Exactly.
Before you put it up. If you don't put it up, you definitely don't have the views. So I would say, yeah, put yourself out there, the perseverance and the grits. And I think I think sometimes people tend to go, oh, find out what you're good at and then do that. And I would say, yeah, I don't get that. Of course, I think if you find out what you're good at and you do it, you probably make a killing out of it. But what you're good at may not always be what you like or what you enjoy. Someone might not be good at cooking, but they might love cooking. And there are many a YouTube channel out there with the really, really, I'm sorry to say, but the cooking is questionable, but they're very popular. People still watch, right? And I don't mean this with any harm or not trying to sound condescending, but I think that there is a space for that as well. I think there's enough space for anything in this little, I don't know, world we live in, because when I'm not a good cook, so when I see something like that, okay, I'm not a lost cause. My skills are probably maybe worse, maybe not that much worse or not that much better, but at least I don't feel alone then. I don't feel like I'm the only terrible cook in the world. Like clearly someone else is just as lost as I am. And there's something to be had there in that as well. So yeah.
And I think putting it out there will expedite your journey of growth at that thing as well. If you're putting up videos of cooking and you do start building a following, they're going to interact with you. They're going to give you their own thoughts and share tips and tricks. And that's something that I've found, even in the space of 4 podcast episodes, the amount of feedback I've had, both positive, negative, constructive, insulting, everything, you take it all on board. And I've got way better by putting it out there than I would have if I just filmed 4 and kept them to myself. So share it. What's the worst that could happen? And it will help you get better along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. How's that been for you, by the way?
It's been challenging, but it's been one of the most progressive periods of my life I've found. I've loved it and I'm learning a lot about myself, and also I just feel like I'm getting better with every episode as well. And I have big goals for the future, and they get more realistic with each and every episode. So thank you for coming along and being a part of that.
No, thank you for inviting me. I feel like I've just kind of waffled on a lot about nothing. Because I remember when you asked me, I was like, I don't know who would want to listen to what I have to say, but it's I hope this, is interesting to people or help someone, and in a sense of just it's not really like, oh hey, follow your dreams. Like it's,
Mm.
yeah, it is, but it's also, I think it's more follow your joy rather than follow your dreams. It's dreams are one thing, but I think uh, if we look at it in a very cheesy, weirdly romanticized way, dreams are gone once you wake up, but joy is always gonna be there even if you're awake, right? So it's, yeah, you should just follow your joy instead of your dreams.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Eva.